Welcome to Neighborhood Narratives, where we spotlight local authors and the stories and experiences behind their work.
Today, we're excited to be joined by Charles, aka Divine Wordsmith, author of Spoken Divinity, his second published poetry collection that is deeply personal, emotionally honest, and rooted in reflection, healing, and truth-telling. Through these poems, Divine explores themes of identity, grief, Black manhood, Black identity in general, and faith, and more, inviting readers into moments of self-reflection that's intimate but also universal.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
Do you like to go by Divine?
Yeah, I go by
Divine. Okay, we won't do the whole government today, okay?
Yeah.
But yes, thank you so much for joining us, Divine. To begin, Spoken Divinity unfolds in two parts, Charles and Divine, which feels like a very meaningful reflection of identity. So please share a bit of your journey into poetry and spoken word.
I'm a cliche. I started poetry in church. That's what I mean. My grandmother used to write a lot of poetry. And when the holidays used to come up in May, Mother's Day would be a poem, Father's Day there would be a poem, Easter there would be a poem.
From your grandmother or from
my
you?
grandmother?
Okay. You mentioned that in your collection.
Yes. So what she would do is she would write them and have me recite them. And the children were very involved in the church that I went to. They always wanted us involved. So that's where I started. And eventually I just started writing my own poetry. And in school, I don't know how the curriculum is in here in Florida, but in New York, where I grew up, in Poetry Month, which is April, we would have to write poems throughout the month for the curriculum. We would have assignments and they would give us different topics. And I was just rhyming words. And the teachers used to encourage me because I was just really good at telling a story while rhyming the words. You know, those were my early beginnings, and then I just fell in love with it as people were actually interested in hearing it. You know?
It is a classic story to have a maternal figure and then also school to help guide students or young people into like passion. So I'm glad that worked out for you. In that vein, what inspired you to create Spoken Divinity? Because this is your second poetry collection, correct?
Yes.
What was the creative process for this book specifically, but in general, all your books that you've published?
So next week, I'm going to be publishing my third anthology.
Congrats.
Thank you. With the first book that I have, it's called Messages from a Boy with an Absentee Father. Self-explanatory. I'm just telling the story of relationship with my dad, what it was like having him around at times, what it meant to, through as a Black man without a father. I feel as if there was a lot of story to tell behind all of it. I have love poems in there, and I don't know if people actually caught it, but like some of the relationships that failed were like, never had a man to talk to me about this. I always have some underlying message in each poem, and there's always a reason for the alignment of all the poems. So with this second book, this was more so about the things that I don't say, things that I wouldn't dare talk about. I think some of the traumas and some of the things that I speak about in this book, I don't think we talk about them enough, honestly. I really wanted to touch on certain topics so people are aware that you can say this. In the art of poetry, there are no rules and there are no restrictions.
Pure self-expression.
Right.
Yeah. I have a kind of follow-up question.
Yeah.
Can you give us, because you also perform these poems as well, can you give us kind of insight as to the creative process behind your performances? Like, what does that look like when you're creating a poem to perform or reading, or you're getting ready to recite something that you've written for a performance?
You like step into Divine.
Right. When I write, it's for performance.
Okay.
When it comes to certain topics that I feel like this needs to be said in public. I usually go off my audience because I've been doing this for a while now. And when I write certain things, I'm just like, ooh, I know they're gonna react to that. So I always have to be prepared. Like, how am I going to say this? How is this going to come across? How is it gonna touch someone in a positive way? I focus on specific things in the poem that will be impactful.
Do you feel like you have like alter ego of sorts?
Yes. Spoken Divinity, Divine versus Chris, separates the performer from the personal individual. I believe that people haven't really tapped into Chris. They always see Divine. Like I go out and I perform, what they see. I'm telling my story. I'm telling Chris's story. They kind of get lost in the whole performance, the performative part of it. The book, you would actually see certain parts of me that I don't show publicly.
Speaking about how there's Chris versus Divine or Divine versus Chris, that's how you divide it in the book, the structure. And so there's 3 poems that especially stood out to us. And there were the therapy session poems, which is in the beginning. Going to bury your father, is going to be in the Chris side A. And then from side B, testimony, which is at the end, which is really great. They felt incredibly vulnerable in different ways. So can you talk about what these poems mean to you and what emotional place you were when you wrote them, when you created them in general? Yeah.
Truthfully, let's start with therapy sessions so we can get this out the way.
And only do what you're comfortable doing.
Sure. Session, I've performed that in several places. I performed that in West Palm Beach at least 3 times.
That's the first performance we heard from you.
Okay. Okay, just Band-Aid off with that, coming to a new space. Wanted people to get a feel of, the stuff that I do. I wrote therapy session because I heard several poets talk about the topic, and it is off of molestation, rape, and all of the emotions that come with it. So I have to say the poets, Lady K, she's from Westchester, New York. She's one of my favorite poets, and she was really explicit, with the poem that she did regarding that topic. The very first that I heard was from a gentleman, Obi West, and he's incredible with words, and the 2 poems that made me feel like, I need to talk about this, honorable mention, after I wrote the poem, I read in a book by Demi Divine. She's also incredible, and she told different stories about the same topic. And I was just like, wow, so like, it was important to me to say, especially for specifically men as well, like if something like that happens to us, we're not very comfortable speaking about it. Women are more vocal about these things, and just felt like it needed to happen for myself. I did it for myself. For once, I wasn't writing for my audience. It was for me, Who's going to bury your father? That poem was inspired by another poet as well, named Black Chakra. He wrote a poem called Who is Going to Bury Your Mother? So that poem is about young men who are in the streets and they're committing crimes and stuff like that. If you go to jail and you spend life in prison, who's going to bury your mother? Who's going to take care of her? I thought that an incredible concept. I actually read, I've never seen him perform it, but I've read it in his book. And I wrote Who's Going to Bury Your Father because of the relationship dynamic, rather, between my father and I, and I've read it. I talk about how he has 5 children, but I'm the only one who speaks to him, and it doesn't matter what we go through, I always come back and say, that's my father, because that's how my mother taught me to be, So it was kind of going through the motion of, we haven't always been close or we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I still want the best for you and I'm willing to be there for you until death.
So you talked about Who's Gonna Bury Your Father. There is a part in there where I'm like, you said, I quit. You referring to the relationship with your father? Were you leaving your mom? Could you explain that part? Or did I imagine it?
With the part I said, I give up, I quit. It was, I'm not going to try this again. because if we're gonna be speaking, you're gonna speak to me with respect, and also you don't listen. So why am I wasting my breath?
Right.
And I always hear my grandmother's voice. Oh my goodness, she's just like, it's your mother, it's your father.
Is it your grandmother
you
from your
gonna do?
mother's side or your father's side?
It's always my grandmother from mother's side. God rest her soul. She, no matter what would happen, she'd just be like, that's your brother, that's your sister, that's your mother, that's your father, So
Right.
I had no choice but to say, you know what, look past it,
Yeah, that's a common mentality in Black families and Caribbean families because your family's from the Caribbean
Yes,
too.
yes.
Yeah. All Caribbean kids here.
We've heard it. We've definitely heard it.
Yeah. But I get it. Family is so important and big and central to our identity because we come from a collective society versus maybe in the States it's individualistic. Yeah.
Like I say it all the time, like the Caribbean, they're gold,
Yeah. Like here, the expectation is you move away from family and you
You're
start your
adult
own
18,
family,
yeah.
your own nuclear family, and everything's like separated.
But not that community-wise too. I can only speak for Jamaica, but strangers become like family. And you could go up the road if you have nothing to eat. Oh, ask Miss Stort there, Miss Stort hands you a plate of food because you're in the community, There's no way you can starve there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even flip side. On a less example is even the whoopings. And it happens in the States as well. I remember my mom telling me when she tried to escape her parents from getting a whooping, she ran into a neighbor, she handled it for them and then brought her back to her parents. So it's just like,
That's another thing. Anyone could do that in your community.
And siblings. But and then one more and testimony.
Okay, testimony.
And the choice to end it on testimony too.
Okay, so testimony. It's on the divine side. Let's start. Why it's on the divine side is because my name was given to me by my aunt because my middle name is Devon. So she changed Divine, and then when I started looking into it, it was just like, Divine would really fit me because of what my story is, so why I decided to put it on the Divine side. You would think it's a little more personal to have it on the Chris side, but I wanted to tell that story because I tell it to anyone who doesn't know me. This mark that I have here, it's permanent. I had 7 surgery there. I've been battling hydrocephalus my entire life, which is where the cerebrospinal fluid builds up in my brain, and they put a tube in there to drain it out. So I changed it 7 times. I had 7 surgeries, and you would imagine has been impactful, and I still battle with hydrocephalus because I haven't had surgery in 10 years. However, I have to write things down. I have to say things over and over and over for me to remember things because there's water in my brain constantly being filtered out, and, growing up with memory problems and having to leave school to have surgery and, having these headaches, it was a real struggle for me. I overcame it, and that's special to tell people because of the divine aspect where God spared my life, because I did my research as well in, what hydrocephalus is and, what the lifespan is and, the things that happen, and I'm grateful.
Instead of writing poetry that's like, superficial, like you choose to share stories like that. What inspires you to kind of like take a dive on the deep end with your work?
I can say since I was a child, when I branched off and I just started writing poems, like they were poems that were just off of hurt. I'm talking about my absent father. I started writing those poems when I was about 13. Some of I just edited and made them sound like an adult version. But I used the tool to help me,
like process.
Little therapy. Beautiful about poetry. It's there for enjoyment. It's there for healing, things of that nature. So it's just no problem for me to just say whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Poetry makes people safe.
You say that generally, but I also want to like emphasize for the reader as well, because they have something to relate to. If like that's something they've done in their life, and even if it's not an exact story, the emotions, the feelings that's conveyed in the text in your
Right.
line, they can feel it, and they can like reflect or introspection or what have you about like how can I heal or to deal with their traumas.
Right, right.
Yeah. Maybe it's not everyone wants to be a writer, but constructive ways to battle or to deal with their traumas.
I would say there's this, I'm new to lingo. So there's this thing where people talk about trauma bonding.
Oh yeah,
Right.
it's very part of social media.
I don't like trauma bonding. You know, the purpose of writing these poems are not for trauma bonding, it's for people to see that, yes, someone else is going through this. Yes, it's okay to talk about it, and also find ways that will help you, you know, and find healing, you know. When I was in college, I was taking a songwriting class, and my professor, he was saying that relatability is like the number one thing you need to think about when writing a song, you know. And I took that and ran with it, basically.
Yeah, themes like health, Black manhood, family relations, and impact of violence, including references like Breonna Taylor, appear throughout the collection. Why were these themes important for you to return to, and what conversations were you hoping to open through them?
Well, for one, at the time of those tragedies, if there were a lot of politicians, there were a lot of poets as well, a lot of people on social media speaking about these things, and like you can't ignore it. You know, people of color are dying in the public eye, and no one is facing any penalty. You know, and the debate about whether a Black person should live or any person of color should live, you know, and go against the excessive force of police officers, you know, because that's what I was talking about. But, you know, it's absurd. Why is this a debate? You know, a lot of these things hurt me, like, personally. I watched the George Floyd video for however minutes it was, and like we watched him get suffocated and watched the last breaths from his body leave him. And what stuck with me was him calling out for his mother. You know, that was the worst experience I've had, seeing something like that in the media. You know, I literally cried in front of the TV when that happened.
Yeah.
You know, I have 6 aunts. I have a baby sister. Oh, I have 2 baby sisters. And, you know, I have a mother, of course, and grandmothers. And I'm big on protecting Black women. Big on it. Heavy on it. You know, seeing Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, unacceptable for me. Unacceptable. Can't stand for it. Like, what is there to argue about?
We're arguing about if BLM is exclusionary. The conversation turned left. That's all people want to focus on, and not what the messaging was for. Like
The people impacted, what the violence was going on.
Right.
Like,
now, there's multiple variations of the name of the movement. Was it Blue Lives Matter? The irony of it all. We're losing what the purpose was for. Not maybe from our end, but from people who refuse to understand. There are people. I'm talking about. Sorry. Let me stop. But yeah.
Those things are not to be taken lightly.
No.
Nope.
Oh, we told you a few of our favorite poems from your collection. 2020 was really nice. Do you feel comfortable of performing your favorite poem from the collection?
Here's my request. Okay, who's going to bury your father? It's December 25th, 2011. My 13th birthday. 11:59 p.m. was the first time he decided it wasn't important enough to call me. It's December 25th, 2021, our first Christmas, my first birthday without my grandmother. There's so much going on in my mind. My dad just cursed me out for the 50th time. At 23, I gained the courage to finally say, I quit. My mother looked up at the man she raised and said something I could not believe. You can't quit. Who's going to bury your father when you leave? I mean, he's the one who chose the streets. You mean to tell me out of 5 children, no one cares but me? When the weight of his absence set out to confine me, I broke myself free. I chose to see reality and not a fantasy. He was never going to change for the sake of me. I cannot free a caged soul, no longer allowing my words to fall on deaf ears. I'd rather be blinded in bliss for knowing I did the best I could for both parents. What's apparent? The fact that his absence has made me a better man. Being raised by women helped me to understand when she needs you to study what she doesn't like to avoid a fight. Someone who will jump up if there's a sound in the middle of the night. Being a father that understands the mission and know that the very presence of a man in the household makes a difference. But who's going to bury your father when he doesn't even seek forgiveness? Why can't I turn a blind eye and mind my business in the midst of his sickness? Why does my mother pressure me after all she witnessed? Reconciliation was not a part of my dream. He has 4 other kids. I'd rather bury him in rhyme scheme. When my mother says, it isn't all about you, what are you going to do when reality hits you? I spent 9 years with the man. If I can forgive him, so can you. So dear black man, I know the world can see the boy inside of you, raging, struggling to keep the facade, but you should give it to God. For the sake of your soul, let it go. You're only angry because you love your father, and someone has to bury him, because even deadbeats don't beat death. Yeah, I love that poem.
That was good.
You say you wrote that when you was 13 or no?
No, this is a recent one.
Okay.
You know, all of these poems are adult poems.
Okay.
The one from the first book, I wrote a lot of those when I was a teenager.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for reciting that to us. And we like to ask our authors, part of the initiative Neighborhood Narratives, their process when it comes to publishing. Because a lot of y'all are indie published, self-published. What experience have you learned as both a writer, creative entrepreneur, and what advice can you share to other writers and aspiring authors?
Trust the process. Do not rush. Ask for help. Ask for help. Individuals who are professionals, whether it's the book cover, whether it's the actual manuscript, all of those things matter because you want your stuff to sound professional. I did go to several people for editing. The first book, I kind of rushed it a little bit. Felt like it was long overdue. But even in the first book, I had people proofread over it, and you know, I had a nice designer. Unfortunately, my first illustrator wasn't available for the second book, but I did go out and seek other people.
Which process, like informally, like media, like what did you take to find your illustrator?
So I'm all around.
Okay.
I travel a lot and I do poetry in different cities. So when I went to New York City and I met another young lady. She's a teacher and she also she's really good with grammar. You know, I talked to her. I talked to another individual who was also a poet, and you know, I had to figure out who to go with. So you know, shout out to Lilo Mars, a great poet, and she's very educated, very smart. She helped me with this process in the book, and there was some, and there's a distinction between page poetry and performance poetry. As we were talking about, we touched on it a little bit earlier. But in detail, whatever goes on paper doesn't work for the stage, and vice versa. So a lot of my process with publishing the book and editing was turning those stage pieces into reading pieces, you know, something that a reader can digest. Not gonna know what a performance cue is going to be.
Or the right cadence to read it in. Yeah.
Exactly, because everyone reads differently. You know, that was probably the biggest issue I had. You know, Lilo, she was always yelling at me. Kidding, she doesn't yell, but she was always hard on letting certain pieces go. go, this doesn't belong in the book, you know, and certain grammar cannot work. You know, it's not the stage. You know, it was a humbling experience. I do advise everyone to get someone who is professional, get a nice illustrator, you know, make sure they have some type of reference that you can go off of, you know, and go through the process. And there are apps that'll help you with these things. Like with my first book, I used Fiverr. You can find any type of service, and you know.
I know earlier you mentioned on a third book. So what can our audience kind of expect from you in the future? What's about where we can find, where you perform?
Yeah, your tour dates and stuff like that.
Okay, so I'm not on tour right now. You can always find me on Instagram at Words of Divine. I usually perform in West Palm Beach at once a month. Generally, it's on a Thursday. I have platforms I do perform on in Orlando, in New York City, in Philadelphia. So you always see me post things like that on my story or on my feed. My books are in my bio. My third book is not out yet. It will be coming out next week. It is an erotic anthology. So that's gonna be interesting. It has lots of illustrations as well. Yeah.
It's spicy.
If I could be frank, a lot of people come up to us poets, and let's be real. Look at this, right? This is really easy to read.
Yeah.
And things that rhyme are easier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then line for line, the way I structure my poems, it's easy to read, you know? So I expect people to read it. They say, I'm gonna support you, Divine, I'm gonna get both of your books, and they don't read it, you know? So I've been doing this thing where they're just like, hey, did you read my book? They're like, oh yeah, what's your favorite poem? Oh. Yeah. But yeah, it means a lot to me that people are actually reading it and trying to understand it. I read a ton of poetry books, you know, and I like to support the local artists, like the artists that I named earlier. Like they have amazing, incredible books, you know, and as I was saying before, you know, certain things that are not performed that you would never hear, I'm just like, wow. You know, so I encourage everybody to read the book, because there are things that you'll never know. There's things you never know unless you open the book.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
And I'm pro books, anything. I lean toward fiction writing. That's who I am as a writer. But like, I studied English.
Right.
I took a lot of poetry in the beginning. I went to school near Chicago. Like, performance-wise, even though I love reading books, beats. The performance aspect beats reading it from a book. Even though it's structured differently, it's just you feel the emotion. You are living in it.
Yeah. I
but
would say,
reading it though allows you times to. You can say
process,
rewind all you want,
Yes.
but you're not gonna get.
No, seriously.
You're not fully absorbing the line.
Seriously,
Yeah.
there were times where I've seen performances and performer would put the same poem in their book and read it, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Like they said that?
Right. And then the value of it shows, because you get over and over and you're like, whoa, the layer, you know? So I definitely resonate with that as well.
Kind of like music, like, some lyrics, they just go over my head.
Yeah.
When you sit down, you go on.
I read lyrics too.
I was gonna say genius.
I legit read the lyrics too.
Oh, that was
Like,
fire.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm.
same, you know, essence.
Right.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.